So we PCS here last summer, kind of went through a little spell, bounced around, trying to find a church and find the church that we wanted to call home. And through every church that we tried, it was always great, except there was always something. And we stumbled across Discover when we had kind of given up and stopped looking, and it was good enough. And then Kelly, my lovely wife here, met Miss Cheryl at the Y, and said, well, I know you guys just moved here, but if you guys are like in a church or looking for a church or anything, she goes, well, that's actually interesting. My husband's doing this. I started seminary in January, so that's been my calling. But so that's how we got started with Discover, and since the first Sunday that we went, it was borderline perfect. For those of y'all, or as you guys came in, you should have got handed a listener guide. It was kind of something like this without all the writing. I already got the answers, that's all. If you guys didn't get one as you walked in, there's some back there on the table. But I was asked a couple months ago if I'd like to speak at the chapel. I said, yeah, absolutely. And you can tell me if I'm misremembering this, but I told you at the time, that's like 3 or 4 months from now. That's a lot of time. I'm going to probably write 3 or 4 different songs. And I think I did. And I was never really sure which way I was going to go with the message or how, because I did ask him, like, what's the topic, like, where are we going with this? Like, point me in the direction and I'll figure it out. But he's like, Bible, choose what you want. So, went back and forth with what would be in place of my heart to be discussed and what God wanted me to share. And going through this series with reaction that as well as looking in retrospectively, like my first time doing preaching. So wanted to actually talk about my calling and kind of and that's actually ties very much into the stage preaching. So we're going through the story of Gideon today, in Judges chapter 6. So the sermon title that I put on here was "But God Still Used Me Anyway." I mentioned. Yes, He's still using me. Sorry. Those of y'all that didn't catch it, I'm ADHD out of the wazoo. We're going to write this together. I have notes. I don't know if we're going to stick to them. And my goal is to be done before tomorrow. So, I have not figured out brevity. I figured out how to talk. So, we'll get there. But, going over the target statement. So, God doesn't wait for us to be perfect. He calls the willing, meets them where they are, and uses them anyway. Tying that back to the title that He's not waiting for somebody to be perfect. He's going to use you no matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing. If He's calling you, He's just looking for the answer.
Yes.
So, like I said, we're going to be in Judges chapter 6. So, when I say Judges, I don't know if your brain goes, I wasn't raised in the church. The first thing you think of is maybe Judge Judy, Judge Joe Brown. My new favorite is Judge Steve Harvey. I didn't know he became a judge, but I found that out not too long ago, so that's super interesting. But that's not the biblical judges that we're talking about. In the book of Judges was a period for Israel where they were, it was kind of chronicling the descent of Israel from a very high point that they were at one point in history to they would fall into idolatry or fall into sin. And you can even see 6 verse 1, and the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So it was just this cyclic cycle going back and forth between where they would start to pull away from the Lord. And it always kind of peaked in their depravity when they would call Israel would cry out to the Lord. And then He would send a judge. And so He would send a character to judge the nation of Israel, in which it was more of a militant kind of personality or a militant person where they would lead and deliver Israel from whatever sort of oppression they were in at the time. So just kind of explaining Judges, we're not doing no theatrics like TV drama. Judges, it's more. You have one second. You said he wants to stay in your arms. No, this is not normal. So I'm yeah. So Gideon was the 4th judge in the book of Judges. It was a series of 12 judges, 12 times that the nation was delivered from whatever oppression they were in. So just to wait top over the beginning of the chapter, because we're going to pick up in verse 11. The nation of Israel, like I said, at verse 1, they were doing what seemed evil in the sight of the Lord. So they started following this pattern of sin. They started practicing idolatry, and they found something to worship instead of the Lord. And going through that, they ended up getting overrun and oppressed by the Midianites. It says the Midianites, the Amalekites, and the Amorites, and the tribes of the east. They were actually so overrun to the point that they were run out of their town. They ran off to the mountains and the caves, and they were sitting there in hiding, fearing for the Midianites, which was a very powerful nation over Israel that was oppressing them. They would actually come to the point anytime they had if they tried growing any grain, the Midianites would come and take it, and the livestock, they would come and basically pillage and plunder, take everything from them. So they're borderline on the kind of on the cusp of famine, sitting there struggling to keep any food that they had. So, catching up to where we are in the book of Judges, the history of Israel at the time. So starting at verse 11, see, and the angel of the Lord came, and he sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joseph, the Abizarite. His son Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress in order to hide from the Midianites. So, just kind of pause there for a second to explain what threshing of the wheat is, because I had to look that up. So the way that wheat was harvested, right? You grow the stalk, it looks like wheat tall grass, but not the whole stalk is what's good. The only one is the grain. The grain that's getting ground into wheat flour or into flour, and that's what we use to make bread. So in order to actually harvest that grain, they take the stalks, they cut them down, they let them dry out in the sun. After they dried out, they have to crush the stalks to separate the husk from the grain. And then in order to, what was called threshing the grain, to separate it, because at this point you just have a pile of like crushed hay. You just have this pile of crushed hay and stuff. So they take what was called a threshing fork, kind of looks like a pitchfork, and then sit there and they toss it up in the air. Now, normally this would be done in a field or on top of a hill, somewhere where there could be a little bit of a breeze. You want like an open plain to do it, because the thresh or the husk was lighter than the grains. The grains were actually heavy. So the idea and the hope was, and the way the practice works, is you toss it up in the air, and the husk would get carried away in the breeze, and the grains would fall back down. Not exactly what you do if you're trying to hide for somebody. If you're throwing a bunch of hay in the air, you're going to get seen. So they're trying to keep what little grain that they have. So it says right here that Gideon was threshing the wheat inside of a winepress. He was in an enclosed space. There was no chance of a breeze. There was very little hope that this was actually done correctly. He's kind of just making a big mess. He's throwing a bunch of dirt around himself for dirt to fall back down on him. Right? But it says right there, he's doing it to hide from the Midianites. He's scared. But he's still doing it anyway. He's doing what he can to try and separate the grains. He's doing what he can to try and survive. Verse 12, Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. Valiant warrior. Right? We're just talking about the guy we just said half a verse ago, not even a whole verse, half a verse ago. He's hiding in the winepress. And we're going to call him a valiant warrior. We're going to call him this distinguished, it's the least that I would call valiant. You're literally hiding. So, oh valiant warrior. So, he's hiding in the winepress. That's point number one, if you want to write this down. So you may feel insufficient, but God gives you, or God brings you identity. You see that no matter what Gideon felt at the time, he didn't feel like a valiant warrior. He didn't feel like he was really this big guy that could stand up to the nation of Gideon. He was scared. He was hiding. But God's already calling him. He sent the angel of the Lord. He calls him, you are a mighty warrior. Right? So no matter what deficiency that Gideon may have felt, God brought him the identity. Alright, so we want to continue in verse 13. So Gideon said to him, Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? Where's all the wonders that our ancestors told us about? They said, Hasn't the Lord brought us out of Egypt? But now the Lord is standing us and hinders over Gideon. So he found his courage pretty quickly. Mr. Scaredy in the winepress, hiding from the Midianites, he found his courage pretty quickly, and he's sitting there questioning the angel of the Lord. He's like, okay, where is it? If you're telling me that the Lord is with us, where to go? Because my ancestors, my grandpa told me about everything that we once used to have. The Lord rescued us from Egypt, but now we're being like all of our lambs and our calves, they're all being taken. We barely have any wheat. Like, look, I'm literally here making a mess of it, just to try to get a little bit of grain that we have. So you see in verse 14, the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in your strength and deliver Israel from the grasp of Midian. I am sending you." So even in this moment of, I don't understand this valiant stuff, where is the Lord in all of this? You see that he felt rather inadequate, but God gives him instructions. Point number 2. He felt inadequate in the situation. They didn't have enough. So where is the Lord? Where is the Lord when the Midianites overran us? And they ran us out of town. We're hiding in caves. Where did the Lord go? But God gave him the instructions. Doesn't matter how inadequate he felt. He says, "You're going to go. You're going to go with the strength that you have. I'm sending you." Okay? So the Lord sent him. He gave him the instruction no matter what he felt, no matter where he was going. He felt insufficient. He gave him the identity of the valiant warrior. He didn't feel adequate as a valiant warrior. We're still in the wine press, by the way. And he gives him that instruction, "You're going to go." So you see it picks up in verse 15. He said to him, "Please, Lord, how can I deliver Israel? Look at my family is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the youngest of my family." And the Lord said to him, "I will be with you. You will strike Midian down as if it were one man." So you can see in this moment that Gideon felt rather insignificant, but God declares the inclusion. It says in Galatians 3:28, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." So in this moment that Gideon's feeling insignificant, he's sitting there calling out. Gideon's family they were no Spartans. They weren't anything crazy. They weren't any Marines. They weren't well known for any of their valiancy or any of their strength. They weren't big and boisterous. I mean, they ran from the Midianites. And it said the Midianites were a great nation. They were already trying to take everything from them. But of that, he says, I'm from a weak tribe. My tribe's not really that strong. And of the weak tribe, I'm the weakest of the weak tribe. Like I'm not anything like who am I to sit here? And the Lord gives him that reassurance. He says, "I will be with you." Did anybody catch that? Hold on, let's go back to verse 11. Who was it that came to talk to Gideon? Who was it that arrived in verse 11? It says, "The angel of the Lord." Well, look at verse 13 and verse 15. It says, "And the Lord spoke." It's not the angel, the Lord spoke. So this is very much what I believe to be a theophany in the Old Testament. This is the appearance of the Lord, or the Lord's characteristics in the Old Testament. Probably one of the best examples of would be Exodus 3, when the Lord came down and spoke to Moses through the bush that was burned but not consumed. It was a theophany. This is also follows the same literary patterns that in the Old Testament, literary patterns of Hebrew, where the angel of the Lord appeared, and the conversation starts, and all of a sudden the Lord spoke. So very much in this period, Gideon is actually talking to the Lord here. He's not talking, he's in the presence of and speaking with the Lord. He's not talking to a messenger. So the Lord is sitting there, he's giving him that identity that you are one in the family of the Lord. I will be with you. It's like you're going to go because I told you. Because you're going to go with your strength. And don't worry about if your strength's good enough or not, because I'm going to be with you. You're going to strike down the entire nation of Gideon as if you're hitting one person. So he gives him that strength. He gives him that reassurance. He declares that conclusion in part of God's name. I lost my place. So you can continue from there. Verse 16. Verse 16, "But I will be with you, said the Lord, and you strike me in this with one man." He gives him that reassurance. Despite that reassurance, you can see point number 4, that you may feel insecure no matter how much you're secure. We're just talking about it. It's pretty easy to trust the Lord, right? I find just the irony that was brought up during worship. It's easy to trust in the Lord. Like he gave you the reassurance. You're part of this family. It's like, but is it? It's easy to say that you trust in the Lord, but when it comes to you're going to strike down the nation of Midian, that it becomes rather difficult to sit here and believe that. So you may feel insecure, but God grants you insight. So now we have Gideon talking with the Lord, and he says, "Well, hold up. Okay, I'll play, but I need a reassurance. Like I need you to prove something. I need you to kind of grant me Give me a sign that this is really what you want, or that this is really your plan. So you see in verse 17 through 21. Then he said to him, if I have found favor with you, give me a sign that you are speaking with me. Please do not leave this place until I return. Let me bring gifts to set it before you. And so he does. He goes off and he gets the gifts, he brings it back, and the angel of the Lord says, put the gifts down on the rock. And he reaches out with the staff that he was holding and touches the gifts on the rock. The fire erupts from the rock, consumes the gifts, and the angel disappears. So Gideon was granted the reassurance, he was granted the sign that this is the favor, you have gained the favor of the Lord. Now, for those of y'all that know the story of Gideon, this isn't the first time he does this. From that moment, he goes on to tear down the altar of Baal. And then after he tears down the altar of Baal and he builds a temple for the Lord at that point, he's given the name Jerubbaal. But as soon as he's done doing this, he starts battling the same battle, or another round of that anxiety and insecurity, right? And this is probably the more well-known part of Gideon. He throws out and says, if this is really the will that you have for me, I'm going to toss out a fleece. I'm going to toss out a golden fleece, and just grant me one more sign that if this really is the will for me, then make the fleece wet with dew and the ground dry. And so it happens that then the next morning he picked up the fleece and wrung it out until the whole bowl of water came from it. Like, okay, so you've been given 2 signs, that should be enough, right? Well, and you can see in verse 37. He says, and don't be angry with me. He goes, okay, I see that you did it. You made the fleece wet and the ground dry, but hey, just one more time. But please don't be angry with me. Let me ask again. Hold on, hear me out. If you can make the ground wet and the fleece dry, he goes, then I'll listen. And so he does. And he goes, the night goes through, it just isn't so happens. And the ground was wet, dew, and the fleece was dry. So he gave him 3 separate signs every time that Gideon asked. You can go back to that target statement that says that the Lord's going to meet you where you are. He's just asking for you to answer. Right? He's not looking for anybody perfect. At no point did Gideon ever get past this point of insecurity. As you can see in point number 5, Gideon felt rather ill-equipped. But God brings the impact for him. So, skipping forward a little bit in the story of Gideon, a lot happens. He had an army of 32,000, and through a bunch of trials and tests and a couple of different actions, he narrowed that 32,000 down to an army of 300, and the 300 is what ended up going on with these Midianites. Go back and read it, really cool story, a lot of information, we can't get through it all right now. But you can see picking up in chapter 7, verse 13, Gideon's still not too sure. He still feels rather less than, right?'s having a bunch of these thoughts of, but you got the wrong guy. He's having a bunch of these insecure thoughts. And he's still doubting whether or not he's voicing it to the Lord. He's not asking for any more signs. But for whatever reason, the night before, he's on the eve of this battle, and he decides, I'm going to go sleep in the enemy's camp. I don't know why. That's not really my late night can't sleep thoughts. I'm not trying to sneak into the camp that people are trying to kill me. Maybe he was trying to do some forward observation. I don't really know. But he snuck into this camp, and he just happened to come across these 2 soldiers, and he was in the right place. God put him in the right place at the right time to hear. And the one soldier said to his buddy, he said, hey, I just had this wild dream. He goes, this loaf of barley bread, came rolling down this hill into our camp, and it hit a tent and it exploded. This is the text, or my translation says that, and it turned the tent upside down. So this loaf of bread hit a tent and it went wild, crazy dream. But his buddy that he's telling the dream to, he says, that can only be, it's right there in verse 14. His friend answered, this is nothing less than the sword of Gideon, son of Joseph, the Israelite. God has handed the entire Midian camp over to him. So God allowed him to be in the right place to see the dream, but not only the wild dream, but the interpretation of the dream. That the Gideon, the son of Joseph, is going to defeat the entire camp, the entire nation of Gideon. So with this, his immediate reaction, verse 15, when Gideon heard the account of the dream and the interpretation, he bowed in worship, returned to Israel's camp, said, get up, for the Lord has handed the Midianite camp over to you. And then he divided the 300 into 3 companies of 100 when he went on But even though through all of this, Gideon never felt well-equipped, he felt rather ill-equipped, God still brings the impact. God still allows him to see that everything's going to work as long as he answers the call and trusts in the Lord. And as soon as he sees the revelation in that, as soon as he has the interpretation of the dream, basically he's allowed to overhear the interpretation of the dream of explosive bread, that his first reaction is bow down and say, praise the Lord, like, that's absolutely, I'm here. Like, you know what, I don't believe that I can do it, but if you're with me, then I can. He runs back to his camp and they're able to run it to defeat the whole Midian camp. That's 5 points that I had, but kind of wanted to tie this back to where I said that out of all the 4 months that I had planned for this, the many different messages that I came up and kind of wrote out, the one turned into, I have like a skeleton notes for a whole series that I made, and this is, I ran off the rails with this, but I wanted to tie this back to where I felt my struggle with my calling. About 2 years ago, I was just having a conversation with my friend one Sunday afternoon, and in the conversation, he just asked me out of the blue, because have you always been this religious? You and your wife, you always been this religious. He wasn't, I said he wasn't a churchgoer, he was Jewish. So definitely wasn't a churchgoer. But he just asked me if you always been this religious. Like, yeah, no, and telling him my whole story and going through it, and at the end of it said, and I'm gonna switch from I'm gonna transfer from the Marine Corps to be a chaplain. And we both looked at each other really confused, like, did I say that? Did you say that? Like, where did I? I've never talked about this before. And I had this huge doubt that came over me. It's like, there's no way I can do this. I had a bunch of these feelings of like, I'm not good enough. There's no way that I can do this. And very much the same way Gideon is like, okay, well, to be honest, I had about 3 weeks of sitting here praying and talking to the Lord that, okay, well, if this is really like, give me a sign, show me something. And he gave me signs here and there. And I think the culmination of signs that he gave me, I was in San Antonio at the time, which, in case you wonder, landlocked city, middle of Texas. I worked in a coffee truck on Sundays with my Jewish friend. And out of nowhere, we had this RP came up. And yeah, the RP came up and started a conversation without any prompting, started a conversation about religion and about careers in the Navy. And I was trying to take her coffee order. And it's just like, first off, there's no Navy chaplains in San Antonio. The Navy doesn't really have a presence in a landlocked city. Just doesn't really have it. There's not a lot of boats in the middle of Texas. Little boats, not ones with chaplains. The little inflatable boats. But, so, it's like, okay, I got it. If you're sending the RP, you're sending the chaplain's helper to come talk to me, like, I get it. But I still battle this anxiety that I was like, okay, but I'll answer, but like, hey, you got a lot of work, because I'm a piece of work. Like, I'm not the right guy. Like, I still don't think I'm the right guy, but it came to me then trying to compare myself to all this, right? If you look at the characters in the Bible, the characters that God used, you got Moses, who was a murderer. Daniel was an adulterer and a murderer. Abraham was weary. Rahab was a prostitute. Jonah was a runner. Jonah tried to run from the Lord. Like, quite literally, he said, yeah, no, I'm out. And that didn't matter. So God brought him back to it, whether he wanted to or not. Which also, Nineveh was also in that city, and a fish got in there. Just throw that out there. So, but you got Jacob, who was a cheat, and he cheated his brother out of the cloak of many colors. And then you got Gideon, the guy we just talked about. He was fearful and anxious. And at no point was anybody perfect. And to sit here and try and realize that I'm trying to compare myself to, am I perfect enough for this? No, I'm not. At no point will I ever be perfect enough for this. Heck, I could probably sin 4 ways all the way here. Like,
I know that's right.
there was at least one person that got me out. But I never will be perfect. And that's the beauty in it, is that God's not waiting for me to be perfect. He's waiting for me to answer.
Amen.
In the same way that God wasn't waiting for Gideon to be, he wasn't waiting for him to be Samson. I don't think anybody ever could be Samson, except Samson. But he's not waiting for me to be perfect. He met me where I was, and he gave me the little signs here and there that I was asking for, and I finally said, okay. And that he's still giving me all of these reassurances, even though I don't say cake, cake. I'm on board, but I still have these doubts and I still have these insecurities. You know, when I talked to my wife about it, at some point during this timeline, I talked to her about it. It's like, you know, what if I switch to the Navy to be a chaplain? And her first reaction was, that makes more sense than what you're doing in the Navy or in the Marine Corps now. Go be a chaplain. That makes more sense than you being a Marine. Okay. Thanks. And then I had the same conversation with my mother a couple months later. She goes, yeah, you talked about it in high school. No, I didn't. I don't think this has ever crossed or ever come out of my mouth before, but at no point had I discussed this with my mother in high school. I don't know what other name she had that she was talking to, but it wasn't me. But everybody else that I've talked to has seen something or been given some sort of something to say, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. I had a conversation with one of the Marines that's known me longer than my wife, and he finished my story before I did. As I was trying to tell him the story, yeah, I was talking about this. He goes, yeah, you're going to be a chaplain. I was trying to tell the story. But going through all of this, everybody at work knew I was some sort of Christian, right? I had a devotional on my desk. I had a Bible that I used to carry around. I still carry around, but everybody knew I was a Christian, right? And I just kind of had it as a title. And that's fun, but Christianity dies if it's just a title. Where Christianity lives is when it becomes a verb. You got to take that title and you got to turn it into a verb. If you're being called, then that's what God's placed on you. If that's your path that if that's the path that He's putting in front of you, it's not a if you may. It's a get up and go. So, take away from this message, which also, side note on this, here's what I found on the ADHD, side note on this, your message going over this morning, your point number one, and the number one reason, I pointed it out to Kelly because I already had my notes on the Bible. Like, I wrote this 4 weeks ago, and it's like, it just, the way that lined up, is like, it's the same, almost the same thing. Christianity is at its worst when it's a noun, but God still uses us to make it a verb. He's not looking for the strongest, he's just looking for the strength. Amen. So, just kind of want to ask it and place on it all day. Like, how many of us have had those moments, the same as Gideon, where we're not feeling strong enough? Or we're not feeling worthy enough or called enough? Like, the only one that was worthy enough laid it all down and he got on the cross. And if we were worthy enough, then we wouldn't need him on the cross. So, in those moments where we're called, in those moments where we're called to talk to a coworker, talk to a friend, talk to somebody embarrassed, it's not oh, but what if? He's not going to cast you out there for you to fail. He didn't put Daniel in the lion's den for the lion to eat him, but David still had to get in the lion's den. So, just how many of us have those moments the same as Gideon where we're sitting here asking for the sign, and we've gotten it. We're still not sure. God gives you the identity. He gives you the instructions. And you see Matthew 28, go out and make disciples. He gives you the instruction, whether you believe you can or not. He still gives you the instruction. He gives you the inclusion. You're part of his family. Not only are you saved, but you're part of his family. You're included in the Lamb's Book of Life. He gives you the insight. He shows you what's going to happen. I've read the end. Spoiler alerts. We win. If anybody hasn't read the end of the Bible, we're going to win. But he also gives you the impact, right? No matter how inadequate, insignificant, insecure, or ill-equipped that you are, you're still included. So, we just bow our heads in time of prayer. Close with this. Lord, I just thank you for today. Thank you for everybody that was able to come. Lord, I just ask that if any of us, if any of us today have been placed on any of our hearts that the calling or the direction that you place on us, Lord, I ask that you give us the clarity and the courage to answer that calling. Lord, you're not looking for perfect. You're not waiting for us to be perfect. In fact, you more than likely call us at the most imperfect time. Lord, I just ask that you give us the courage to answer that call. I can say personally that I've had some of the most amazing moments since I answered that call. I've also had some of the most challenging. You're not promising that it's going to be easy, but you're promising that you will be with us. Lord, and if there's anybody here today that doesn't yet know you, Lord, and you're knocking on their heart and you're calling on them too, Lord, I pray that you give them the courage to just pray that prayer of salvation, Lord, that you recognize that you are the only way, that you sent your Son to die for us, and that's through your Son's righteousness and that your Son's perfect sacrifice that we may be saved. Lord, in your holy name I pray. Amen. Let's eat.
Pray for dinner.
Pray for dinner. Sweet Lord, bake the eggs.
Time to go.
Betty, you want to come pray for dinner?
Yeah,
Come on.
good job, bud.
Yeah. Look, we sat up here for half a circle.
Great, you got it.
Ready?
Got it.
Say, head bowed, eyes closed. You got to speak louder. Give us grace to go through the rest of the day. And into tomorrow. Amen. Take a mountain elevation.
I'm sorry you had me be person like that.
No, you're good.